Video I showed you how I put together and created a kit for one of the X-plane models that Dinosaur Rocketry does. Today I'm going to actually put one of the kits together exactly as you'd find it coming out of the box and show you how simple it is to put together. So first thing is we're going to need a few things. This is Bob Smith Super Gold Plus. This is a foam safe super glue that won't melt the foam. I have some CA accelerator that helps to set the glue. It also takes some of the spray contact cement off, and also any Sharpie marker if you got that in the wrong place, if you were doing panel lines or something like that. And then for this model you'll also need some 3M Super 77 as a spray contact cement. You're going to spray that on both sides and then let it dry and then put it together. I've got an X-Acto knife. I've got the roll of 3M Blenderm tape here that came with the kit. I've also got some masking tape that I'll use when we do the spray contact cement to make sure it doesn't get everywhere. I'm also going to grab a paper towel here for cleaning my hands if I need to. And then I'm going to look at what's in the kit. So I've got some Velcro pieces. I've cut the Velcro into two pieces, one for the battery and one for the receiver. I've got 4 little plastic tabs here. These are going to glue on both sides of the model on the lower fuselage in 2 different places, and that's what's going to support the rail buttons when you put the screw through the body. I've got the 2 rail buttons and the 2 screws. I have taken my X-Acto knife and I kind of spun the knife around to kind of countersink the hole so that the head of the screw sits down a little bit deeper. It's not really required. It just helps there be less friction when you put the model on the rail. And we've got the motor mount, which is pre-assembled. There's a part in the front here that's glued on. That'll be the front, and then the part that can move here, that's the motor hook side that allows you to take the motor on and off. We've got some lead weights that are in there. I've got 2 push rods that are pre-assembled or pre-bent. We've got 2 styrene strips. These are going to be glued on the bottom of the model for road rash protection where the model lands and hits the ground. And then I've got the model pieces themselves. So this is the back half of the fuselage. So you can see it's already taped. It just hinges open. It's got the full flying surfaces already installed in it. Got the front half of the fuselage top view, which is marked. It should say top on it. Got the lower half of the fuselage. Again, that's taped, so it should unfold. That's going to go on the bottom half of the body. And then here's the top half of the fuselage. Again, that'll go on the top half. And then this part is the top view doubler. So this is going to double over the top view, and what this is going to do is this is going to add a little bit of thickness to the model so you can round the nose a little bit nicer, and then it also will glue to the top of the body, and it'll help reinforce the taped joints so that you have the joints staggered a little bit, so it just adds a little bit of stiffness to the model. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I figured out what parts I need. The first thing I'm going to do here, and this may be slightly out of order from what the instruction manual or the photos show. Follow the instruction manual, the photos. Some of the things aren't really critical what order you do the steps. Some of them are though. So if you don't know, it's better to just follow the manual. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top view here, the part that doesn't have the lines on it. I'm going to put that part down. And I've got the wing upside down. That'll have the spar visible. And I'm going to take the tape. I'm going to make a clean cut. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tape that front view onto the rear view of the fuselage and put some of this Blenderm tape right across the joint. And I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to flip it over. And I'm just going to trim that tape on the edges. I'm going to trim inside the slot And then I'm going to trim the other side. Okay, get rid of that. Sticky. Okay, so now I've got basically the whole top view of the model basically unfolded. Now I put this tape joint on the bottom of it, so that on the top you won't see the tape joint. So the first thing I'm going to do, the spar is already glued in, so you don't need to do anything special with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the joint here in the back. I'm going to put a good amount of that foam safe glue in the joint. Make sure it's on both sides and that you have enough of it. And I'm just going to put glue in that joint. Make sure that it goes in there and fills up the seam. I rub it with my hand to kind of even it out, and then I'm going to hit it with some of this accelerator. Rub over it, and then I take a little towel. Just wipe it. This stuff sets pretty quickly. You shouldn't really need anything under the table. Since you've got the tape under there, the glue can't really go anywhere, but if it's something you care about, like your wife's dining room table, you may want to put some, I don't like wax paper because it tends to stick to the super glue. I prefer parchment paper lately. Okay, so that part's glued on, and now I'm going to do the same thing with the front that I just taped. So again, put a little glue in there. Okay. Now you can always turn these so that the control horn is pointing up so that the model still lays fairly flat. And I'll get that with some accelerator. And let that sit for a couple of minutes. Now one thing I did do before I started is I used some 220 grit sanding paper and a sanding block, and I rounded a few of the edges. Now on the X15 some of the edges look better square, so the edge that's along here that the control surface goes on, I didn't want to round that too much, and with these installed you can't really do a whole lot, so all I did was just basically knock off the corner. I did get in and I kind of rounded the leading and trailing edge of the control surfaces a little bit. And I rounded the leading and trailing edge of the wing. I didn't round the wing tip. And then I rounded just this front part of the chine here up to where the black line stops. I didn't want to round this because we're going to glue onto that later. I also took the fuselage top view. I kind of rounded the front of the nose and the top just a little bit and the leading edge of the fin, and then I just kind of broke the corners on the back. On this piece here, I didn't round any of the edges. I broke the corners on the back side here. I didn't do anything with the bottom because we're going to glue the styrene sheet on it. And I didn't glue the bottom, I didn't round anything on the bottom front here because we're going to glue the styrene sheet on that as well. And I didn't do any rounding on this piece yet. I'll do that before I glue it on. I'll round the top of it. The top is marked, and I'll round that piece before I glue it on because it's easier to sand it before you glue it on, and you've got a little ledge there, so I'll set that aside. Okay, so while your fuselage is drying, the top view anyway, I'm going to go ahead and glue the fuselage side view top piece here. So again, I'm using the foam safe CA, a little accelerator, squeeze it together. Clean it off with a paper towel. Make sure you don't stop with a paper towel or the paper towel will be stuck forever in there. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same with the bottom part of the fuselage. So again, I'm making sure I get enough on both sides. Make sure I don't get any spill. Make sure the glue is there. Kind of squeeze it together. Hit it with the accelerator. Kind of wipe it with your hand. Okay, so now while that's drying, what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the plastic strip to the bottom of the fuselage in two places to reinforce, so when it lands it has something a little more sturdy to land on. It's not going to tear up the foam edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set this like this. and see where is it going to hit when it touches the ground. So it's going to hit this front part and it's going to hit this back corner. So basically I kind of want to center my styrene strip on the front about where it is there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue on the styrene strip, and then I'm going to spray some accelerator on the foam. Now what I'm going to do, very carefully, now I'm just going to press that styrene foam and just make sure it's glued well. I'm going to let it overhang the edge of the table so it doesn't stick to it. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other styrene strip sheet. I'm going to kind of measure where the bend in the foam is for the lower fin. I'm going to take and I'm going to put a little crease in there. I'm not going to bend it 90 degrees. I'm going to bend it just a little bit so it has a natural bend in it. So it's going to conform to the shape of the foam. Then I put some CA on that as well. And then spray the area that I'm going to glue on and touch the styrene strip down again and hold it till it's good and wipe it. Then all you need to do on the little extra piece here is just make a score with your X-Acto knife, and you can break that piece off, and then it'll be flush with the end. Okay. So that's already done. So then what I'm going to take the little plastic tabs that I have. I'm going to glue a tab on the bottom of the fuselage, and I'm going to kind of make them about 6 inches on either side of the joint here so that they're about a foot apart, so that the rail buttons are far enough apart that they won't bind really easily. So I'm just going to glue it about 1/8 of an inch up from the bottom and push that down. And I'm going to do the same with the one on the back here. I'm going to push that down on. Just make sure they're about 1/8 of an inch up from the bottom. You don't want them too close to the middle of the body, or they'll start hitting the rail will start hitting the servos and stuff. So once I've got those in place, I'll flip it over and I'll take the other two pieces, put some glue those in place. Now you don't really need a fillet or anything on those. All they're doing is just supporting the screw when you put the rail buttons in. Okay, so we got that all good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, I'm going to twist, I'm going to make a little hole in the center of each one of those plastic reinforcing pieces. And then I'm going to take my screw and my rail button. I'm going to start that screw in to the plastic piece, and I'm going to screw it down till I see the other side. I can see it's kind of making a little dimple where the screw's going to come through. Then I know where it's centered, and I'm going to take my X-Acto and start another little hole and then continue screwing it in so that you've got the screw all the way through. I'll do the same with the other side. I made my little hole there. Take my screw. Oops. And I'll start the screw in. So it starts to poke through a little bit, and then I'll finish the hole with the X-Acto. You kind of feel it with your finger. And I'll keep screwing it in. Okay, and now the screw goes all the way through. Now they're a little long, so I'm going to take my side cutters here, kind of cut those off. And then you can take a file and grind those down if you want. I'm going to put just a little bit of foam safe glue on the top and set it. And all that does is that just kind of covers up the sharp edge so that nothing's going to get caught on anything. Okay, so that's the bottom piece. Alright, so then I'm going to take the top doubler piece here, and I'm going to put, again, glue both sides of the joint. Push it down, make sure there's glue in the seam there, kind of clean it up with your finger. Kind of squeeze the joint together, you'll see the glue kind of squeeze out. Kind of clean it up. Let it sit there for a little bit. Make sure your glue bottle is still open. Okay, now the styrene here that I put on, if you overlap the edge a little bit, you can take a little 220 grit paper and just sand the corner and kind of round it if it bothers you. It's not really affecting anything. I've also taken a little super glue, and I'm going to put a little fillet on the leading edges and right here on the corner, and hit it with a little accelerator and wipe it off. And what that does is that just helps reinforce the edge there so that when it lands, if it hits some grass or something, it's not going to peel the styrene up and off of the lower half. Okay, so at this time, I'm just going to do a check. Now I've done this before when I put the kit together, but you want to do a check. So I'm just going to test fit the fuselage piece into the doubler. What I want to do is make sure that once it's in, it's not causing it to curve up. It's nice and straight, and the fuselage is going to be fairly straight, and then it fits good. If they're a little snug, if they don't want to go down in really easily, you can take your fingers and you want to just push carefully so you don't crack the model where these little joints are. Okay, just take your time, go a little bit at a time. Okay. You can see that felt pretty snug. The spare piece of foam that is in the kit, if it doesn't fit but it's pretty close, instead of trimming it with your knife, what you can do is just take the foam, put it on edge through the slot and kind of slide it down each slot. And what that does is that just kind of widens the slot just a little bit. You'd rather have it snug so that it gives kind of a mechanical joint than overly loose. Okay, so I've glued that together. Okay, now I'm going to take the fuselage that I already glued the pieces together, and what I've done here is my video camera crapped out for a minute, so I had already done this, but all I'm doing is I'm taking blue masking tape and I'm running it down and I'm covering the outside of the lines that were drawn on the top of it. It says top on it. So I'm going to cover the two sides up to the strakes where the line ends. I'm going to cover the control hoards so those don't get all sticky when I use the contact cement. And I'm going to cover a little bit of the wing, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the garage, I'm going to spray contact cement on that surface, I'm going to spray contact cement on the bottom of the doubler, and then I'm going to come back and glue it together. So I'm back from the garage. I sprayed my contact cement on the bottom of the upper part and on the top of the fuselage here, so I'm going to peel this off. And again, if you get any overspray onto any of the foam or the plastic bits, all you need to do is just spray a little of the foam safe CA onto the area, and the contact cement should come right off, including on your hands or your forearms or whatever. Okay, so you can tell, I don't know if you can tell, but where the glue has been applied, it's kind of a matte finish and not that shiny finish that's on the top of the model. So now what I'm going to do is be careful, because you only get one shot at this. So once this stuff sticks, it's stuck and you can't really get it apart. If you have an edge up, you can spray the foam safe or the accelerator in between the joint and work it up slowly, and it will eventually come loose. If you get it stuck down completely, you're pretty much hosed, because you'll tear the foam before you ever get this stuff off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put something under it so that I don't accidentally flop down the front when I'm not ready. And I'm going to get the back end started. So I'm just looking to make sure that I've got it aligned with the back, that the motor cutout looks good, that my slots are pretty much lined up top to the bottom, and that it's flat. Okay, so now I'm just working my way forward. I'll take that out. You can always stick a piece of spare foam in through the slot to make sure that things stay more or less aligned. It's not super critical. Okay, now I just push that down. Okay, so that's down, that's pretty good. You don't even really need to give another joint. Now, at this point, I've already rounded the nose a little bit on the top piece. So I'm just going to round it a little bit more with my 220. I'm not going to round the front yet until I get the top and bottom pieces on to see where I need to round it for the actual strip. Now again, I pre-rounded the top piece here because once it's on, you can't really get in there and sand it. So you want to have rounded that piece before you glue it on. Okay, now I'm going to flop it over. And each time you flop it over, you can just turn these guys all the way so that the horns aren't sticking down in the way. Okay, I'm just going to kind of same thing here. Either use 320 grit or 220. You just want to go slow and make sure you don't catch the sandpaper because it can tear the foam pretty easily. Okay, so around that nicely. See, it sands really easily, so you just want to use a light touch. The foam kind of has a grain sometimes. If you sand by pulling toward you, it gives a little smoother cut to the sand than if you go back and forth or go just one direction away from you. You'll have to just kind of see. Okay, so I rounded that, so that gives kind of a nice smooth surface. Okay, so there's the top view. Now, by laminating that, that's laminated over where the joints are. It should give a nice strong fuselage. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test fit the upper fuse now into this piece, and just make sure that all fits nice and good. Now, the thing is, on this, since the control horns are sticking down, I'm going to leave the back end of the fuse off of the table so that it's flat. Okay. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to look, make sure that that fuselage is flat and straight. And then I take my foam safe glue and make sure that things look good. I'm going to put a fillet right down both sides. Okay, so I'm going to look, make sure that it's straight up and down the way I like it, and then hit it with the accelerator on both sides. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of push down, make sure that tail looks straight. Make sure it's pushed down all the way. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to put an extra fillet down both sides once that's done, just to kind of fill in any gaps. It'll just look a little nicer when it's painted, but it doesn't really need it for strength. I'm going to look down the front, just make sure that, yeah, it looks pretty straight. Looks pretty good. I'm going to give that a second to set up before I do anything. Still just pushing down to make sure that everything looks good. Okay, now, this is the one thing that you want to make sure you do now, and not later. So you want to put the control horns in before you glue the bottom, because it's almost impossible to get the little horns in once the tail fin is in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the control horns and one of the wires, and I'm going to come down 3 holes from the top, get the wire started, and I'm going to kind of twist back and forth carefully, making sure that I don't poke that sharp wire through my thumb. So the wire is coming in from the inside of the model so that it's away from the fin. If you put it on the other side, what can happen is it'll hit the wire when it tries to move. So you want it on the inside so that you're clear to move, like that. Okay. Now, one thing you can do is take a little piece of tape. Once you get the rod in there, you just kind of tape the rod down so it's not flinging around and going to poke a hole in something. Okay, so I'm going to come in from the other side. I'll find the 3rd hole down. Same thing. I'm just twisting back and forth. In the hole, it's already there. You want to be careful about using the X-Acto, because it's really easy to cut this, and then this stuff will just crack, and you don't want your control arm failing. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this on the edge of the table, and I'm going to put something kind of heavy on the wing and the fuse here, just so that it can't go anywhere. But I've got this up against the edge. Maybe I'll bring this around and do it on this edge if I can. So what you want is you want it all the way up against the table, but held flat, because what you're going to do is you're going to glue the bottom in now, and you just want to make sure that it's not warped when you glue it in. So I'm going to insert the bottom piece here. Again, you want to kind of support the model while you push down these pieces. Support the fuselage piece, support the wing, so you're not putting any stress on it and you're not going to crack something. I'm going to open the dishwasher there so I can get the model up all the way against the table. Okay. Okay, so I made sure it's pushed in all the way. I don't see any gaps. I look from the front, make sure that it's more or less straight up and down. Make sure it's all good to go. And when it is, I'm going to put a nice bead with the foam safe CA on both sides. Hit it with the accelerator, and then you want to kind of just push down, make sure it's making full contact. Sometimes you'll see the glue squeeze out a little bit if you put a little pressure on it. Make sure that vertical fin is kind of vertical. You can kind of push on it just a little if it's maybe not quite perfectly straight. And then once that's done, put a second bead. Again, that second bead is just to make it look a little nicer when you paint it. Once it gets locked together like that, it's not, you're going to break the foam before it ever gives way. Okay. Okay, starting to look like an X15 now. So you've got your reinforcing on the bottom, where it's going to land on, and you've got your rail buttons installed. And really the last thing that we need to do before we put the radio equipment on is the motor mount. Now the motor mount, again, I've glued the front part of the hook, so that's going to go forward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the hook in a 45-degree angle so it's in between the foam, so when I pull the hook out it's not hitting the foam. I'm just going to do a little test check here. Make sure that it fits. If you have a spare motor casing that's empty, you can put that in. That just helps keep its round shape while you're gluing it in. Now this fits pretty good as it is. Now again, you don't want to use any epoxy on this because epoxy in the tail is just a death sentence for gliding. You don't need it for strength. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just double check that the tail is straight, that it's not curving up, and I can see it's got just a little bit of a curve. So I'm just going to pull down on that. And then all you're doing is just put a little bit of glue in the joint on both sides. And again, you don't need a lot of glue. I mean, this thing isn't going anywhere. It's you know, the motor is pushing forward, and in front here is foam. So there's no ejection charge. So all the motor mount needs to do is just not fall out, basically. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over. And we'll fill it on the bottom. And give it a little tiny little set. Okay, now I'm going to look down the fin, make sure the fin is straight. Kind of hold it in place. Fill the glue on both sides. Now we'll look at the top. Now the top one, that fin is a little more flexible, and sometimes it curves just a little bit toward the end. So you just want to make sure that it's more or less straight when you glue it down. That will just help hold it in place. Okay, so as that sets up, I'm going to go get my radio equipment, and we'll install the radio and then we'll balance it. So we'll take a quick break. Okay, so the model's all assembled and glue's dry, so now we're going to set up the radio. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bind my receiver to the radio. So what this does is this just communicates with the receiver and the radio and tells it to that this particular model is model number 5, and so it'll only listen to that model, so you can't accidentally have your radio set on the wrong thing. So I'm going to put my bind plug that comes with the receiver into the bind plug outlet. Then I'm going to put my single cell battery into any input plug in the right polarity, and it'll start flashing. And then I'm going to push in the button on the back of the radio, turn it on, and it'll start flashing. The receiver flashes again, and they're talking back and forth. And then the light should come on in a couple seconds as a solid light. saying that it's all bound together, and now that's done. So all I need to do then is I can take off the power, take off the bind plug, turn the radio off. I keep my bind plug clipped onto my radio, so if it ever unbinds I can do that again. So I'll turn the radio back on. I'll plug the battery back in. It'll take 5 or 10 seconds and then it should light back up again saying, okay, we're talking to each other and everything's good. So now the light's solid, so I know it's working. Okay, now previously I've set up the radio so the delta mixing is on, and what that's going to do is that's going to mix aileron and elevator. And I'm going to plug in a servo into the elevator and the aileron connection. Okay, so I'm moving the sticks and making sure they both move. Now something that I do is I just make a little score on each of the servo tabs and break those off because I'm not using the tabs to glue anything on or to screw it together to anything. And the tabs just kind of stick out and they look funny. So again, it's like that styrene plastic for the bottom of the model. You just make a little score and then you bend and they'll snap right off. So I want to make sure the servos are working right though. Okay, so next thing I got to do, I got to make sure the servo arms are more or less straight. So these servo arms can go on 2 different directions and the splines line up a little better one way or the other. So I'm just making sure that the splines are kind of more or less perpendicular. Now I've taken off the little arms that come on them and I put on the thick plastic arms that have tiny holes. There's a long plastic arm and there's the arm that comes with them already installed, and then there's a thicker plastic one. So I'm going to use the thicker plastic one with the small holes and these are about 5/8 of an inch on either side of the servo. So I'm going to put the little screws back in place. These are little tiny Phillips screw. Okay, so I've got that back in. So now what I'm going to check for direction. So the servos are going to go on the bottom of the model. Okay, you want the wires sticking forward because the receiver is going to go on the front part. So the servos are going to sit on either side of the model, kind of like this. Now I know that when I move things in the right way and the servos are on the right side, if I pull back on the stick, I want the arm to push that way because that's going to make the control go the right direction. So if I pull back, that's up elevator, so I want the back of the surface to go up like that when it pushes. So the servo arm is going to have to push this way, both of them, if I want up elevator. So that's the wrong way. So if I just flip them over, now they're going the right way. Okay, I've already set the directions right on here that I know works, but I'm double checking. Okay, now I'm going to do right aileron, which means that the right surface, this is upside down, so the right surface is over on this side. When I go right stick, it's going to pull the left one down and the right one up, and that's the direction that they're moving. So I know this is up. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some little clippers that I have, and I'm going to clip off the bottom of the servo horn that's going to be in the way from gluing it down. Okay, and I'm double checking I did the right side. Okay, so now the directions are going the right way. So this is going to be on this side, this one's going to be on this side. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting the wire through that surface from the inside of the model. So the servo is on this side, goes through the wire goes through there. So now I'm just going to double check again because you only get one chance. So you can see this, when I do up elevator, the back of the surfaces go up. When I go down, when I go forward. When I go right aileron, the one on this side should go up. Since it's upside down, that's up and down. Okay. So those are going the right direction. Okay. So now what I want to do is again get something heavy I can put on the wing. Make sure that the model is not moving. Okay, now I don't use double back tape because I've had double back tape come loose on me in the hot summer months. So I just glue these on. These are only $10 servos. They don't cost all that much. So you can always pop them loose if something goes horribly wrong and you don't get them set up right. So I put actual glue on the servo. I'm holding the control surface more or less flat. I've got the rod angled inward just a little bit so that rod's not going to catch on the tip. And I'm just going to push down on that servo. Make sure I've got a little glue on both sides of it. I don't want to get the servo really wet with this stuff. So. Okay, so I glued that servo on. Okay. Turn it around. Do the same thing on the other side. Put a little glue spot on there. I want to make sure the surface is more or less flat. You can always fine tune it with the radio. There's no binding. The rod's sort of straight. A little bit of glue there. A little accelerator to set it. Okay. So while that's setting up, then I'm going to double check where the receiver is going to go. So you want the receiver and the battery as far forward kind of as you can. Now the rail buttons are on this side of me, so I'm going to put the equipment on the other side just so there's no wires and stuff. They're going to catch on the rail. The rail's going to be on this side. Okay. I'm going to undo the servo that's on the side that is going to be opposite from where the receiver is going to sit. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little screwdriver, make little 2 holes, kind of run it sideways there, and route my servo wire and connector. To that side. I'll plug that back into the elevator spot. Plug the battery back in. Okay. Make sure that's all still working. Okay. Just making sure they're moving. They're not going anywhere. Okay, so now what I want to do, I kind of stretch the wires out. I don't want them to be super taut in case there's any flex or anything. So I kind of want the wires up against the fuselage. I'm going to see about where the receiver wants to sit. I'm going to take my little Velcro here. I've already got Velcro on the bottom of the bottom of this receiver. I'm going to take the other material, stick it there. Okay. I'm going to turn this sideways so that my antenna can kind of go that way without being bound up. So now I'm going to just push the Velcro down. That's my receiver. Now, I'm not going to tape any of these, the antenna down, because I'm going to take the receiver out for painting. Okay. Now the other thing, I've got the battery here, so I'm going to put the Velcro for the battery. Now my wire is only so long, so I know that I can't put the battery any further forward than that. Now you could, if you're having a lot of trouble balancing the model and you're having to add a lot of weight that you don't want, you can always use servo extensions and mount the receiver and the battery up even further, but generally you won't need to do that. Okay, so I'm leaving a little gap so I can plug and unplug the battery. Okay. My Velcro there. The battery's plugged in. Okay, so that's all there. Now I'm going to look and just make sure back is up, forward, the back end goes down, right one up. Okay. Okay, so that also looks good. Now I've set a little bit of up trim for glide already. That looks okay. So now I'm just going to look from the side and see, do those surfaces look perfectly flat? If they're not, you can go into the little trims here and you can adjust them slightly. Those look pretty good. Okay. So that's that. Okay. Now we're going to balance the model. Okay, so the radio is installed. See, that didn't take long. Okay, so I've taken a loaded motor. That's my heaviest motor that I'm going to fly with. I'm going to install that into the back end. I've got my little balancing tool. It's two pencils stuck into a vise. Now, I know that I want this thing to balance a little nose down. Just a little bit behind the joint. Now I've included in the plans where this thing should balance. So I'll pull the pencils out a little closer so it's easier to see. Okay, now this is balancing just about perfect with basically 2 1/4 ounces of nose weight. Let's double check here. Okay, so just a little behind where the joint is. It's bouncing a little bit nose down. It stabilizes out. That's just about right. So I'm going to stick the nose weight on, double check my movements on the control surfaces, make sure everything's set up. Then I'm going to pull the radio, the battery, and the receiver off. I'm going to tape down the servo wires, and then I'm going to mask off the servos and the ends of the servo wires and get ready for painting. And then I'm just going to paint the whole thing flat black and then apply the sticker shock markings after that.